G'day everybody, hi, my name is Danny and welcome to Board Game Sanctuary, where we talk all things board games as well as combining them with elements of nature and things that are green. In this video, we are going to be talking about brand new board games and how often we should be adding brand new board games to our collection. I'll be sharing some of my personal experiences, some of my tips, and I hope you can join me for the journey. Let's get started. Hey Danny, have you heard about this brand new board game? They finally streamlined the rulebook in this 3rd edition so that now anybody can play this game. What are your thoughts on these upgraded premium board game components? Have you seen this new game? It does the same theme, but 10 times better than the other 3 games that we own with the same theme. Quick, there's only 29 days left to back this game on Kickstarter. I don't want to miss out. Alright. Can we stop buying brand new games now? I think we bought them all. So, whether you're new to board gaming or whether you're an existing avid long-time hobbyist, discovering a new board game is incredibly gratifying. It's almost that dopamine rush that you get whenever you see a brand new game that tantalizes the senses and really engages you in a theme that you've been waiting for ever so long. I mean, I had that same feeling when I discovered Ark Nova for the first time, a heavy Euro about building zoos. And here's Ark Nova. And that kind of evoked and awoken a beast inside of me when that game came out last year, that it was a game I had to get. And in this video, I just wanted to share 5 tips or 5 considerations to think about that kind of helps to keep your collection in check. And I can honestly say that I've probably only played about 70% of my collection, and there's still 30% of my board game collection just sitting there gathering dust. I guess that was the inspiration for this video, was to be able to share some stories with you about how my board game collection has grown, but also share some tips with you about, do we actually need every single game that we see? So when it comes to considering whether you're going to buy a new board game for your collection, the first tip I have is to ask yourself whether you'll need this game in 2 weeks' time, 3 days' time, maybe even in a year's time. Especially when it comes to Kickstarters, where games aren't really fulfilled for, months on end. Really kind of think about whether that game will give you that gratifying feeling that you'll get at the moment that you buy it. So often I tend to wait. I look at a game and then wait a couple of days and go, do I still feel the same excitement that I initially did when I first discovered or heard about the game? Often I'll also go onto the Board Game Geek page and investigate the game a little bit to see if it's the right fit for me, and if there are some videos, I'll look at the videos. But ultimately, I'll tend to wait a little bit. And that waiting time allows your brain to kind of mull over and kind of head over that peak of excitement that you might initially have. And if that excitement is still there and that spark of desire to get that game for your collection is still there a week later, then definitely hit the buy. The other thing I also try to do is to try and avoid the hype a little bit. If I'm off social media for a couple of days and not get exposed to the constant advertisements of different games that are coming out, I'll tend to feel like, I don't feel like I'm missing out on new games. Whereas if I spend every day on Board Game Geek or every day, looking up games, I feel like that kind of spurs that desire to buy new games a lot more quickly, especially when you hear about games being released at Essen or Spiel. You're like, what are the top games? Which game has the most thumbs up on Board Game Geek? I've got to really add that to my subscribe list. If I can kind of avoid that for a while and go for a period without checking those sorts of things, I know it's extremely hard to do, I would probably be less likely to feel like I'm missing out on something good. One really good thing that I've tried to do is to wait till a game has actually officially been released at the game stores. Not only is that kind of helping those game stores, but also it means you get a bit more feedback from the regular purchasers and regular consumers on a game itself, rather than from, say, like reviewers or people that might have had advanced copies. I guess a good example of a game that I've had to hold back on recently is the sequel to Ryan Locket's Sleeping Gods, and I think it's called Sleeping Gods Distant Skies, which kind of takes the game to the air, kind of like the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild sequel, where the sequel game is kind of set in this cloud area above the actual main game map. Sleeping Gods Distant Skies is one that I initially, when I saw, I'm like, I must have that game. And I love everything about Sleeping Gods. I think it's probably one of the best solo or two-player experiences I have ever played in any board game. If you want a game full to the brim of narrative, branching decision points, cool, interesting combat mechanisms, and games that you can literally dabble in for hours and hours and explore, Sleeping Gods is definitely that beast. And so when I saw Sleeping Gods Distant Skies, and I know I'll probably eventually get it, I actually had to hold myself back a little bit because, you know, I just was like, I haven't unlocked everything in the base game yet. How can I possibly ever find the time to then delve into the sequel? So I've decided for myself that I'm gonna play the base game to its completion, and then upon that completion, I'll probably look at getting the sequel. And my second tip is to take the time to play the games that you already own. If you've already invested $50 to $100 per game box in your collection, having played those games once or not at all, you've kind of not given that game the chance and the life and the breadth that it really needs. You know, games like Underwater Cities have only sat in my collection where I've played them once. Even though I've really enjoyed that one experience, it's not really enough to really fully experience the game itself. And because this game is quite complex and deep, you know, giving it that chance and that time to kind of grow and allow me to see why initially chose to add it to my collection is something that I need to give each game a chance to do. Sometimes there's games that sit in your shelf that are left unplayed that actually really surprise you once you finally get them to the table. I've seen games where the art isn't very appealing at all, but then as soon as you play it, you just really see how beautifully designed the game is. And ultimately, time is super important. You've invested so much time into picking the game, you should invest an equal amount of time, if not more, in enjoying the game. My third tip is called the 3 times rule. And what that means is basically whenever you learn a brand new medium to heavyweight game, give that game 3 goes. Play it 3 times in a row, and after the 3 times, see if that motivation to want to play that game more is still there. And by playing it 3 times, you use the first time to kind of just get the kinks out of learning all of the little niggly rules. Your second time is really like your first go at the game with the proper rule set. And then your third time is to really test out different strategies that you might want to explore. And then after your third time, you'll really get a good sense of whether that game is a right fit for you. And I've always found that the 3 times rule actually really works so well. A game I recently did that with was the game Teotihuacan City of Gods. Now, this was a game that I avoided for a long time, mainly because it looked really dry and there were so many symbols and rectangles that I was like, nah. But as soon as I kind of dedicated some time to learning the rules and then actually playing the game, I discovered that upon the second and third play, I was like, you know what, this game has risen to one of my top 5 favorite games just because I could see how the puzzle actually worked. I also like how games can show you different pathways, and that's what makes for some good game design. The fact that a game can have multiple avenues for winning, where you might go heavy on one strategy with the set collecting in one game, and the next game you might go and, you know, focus on particular victory point scoring tracks. Another thing I also consider is to think about whether I already have a game that does the same mechanic in the best way possible in my collection. For example, the tableau building and the card play in Wingspan is something that kind of is evoked in other games like Imperial Settlers. They're both Euro games, they both have cards with different effects where you create card combos and resource engines, yet the theme is different, but essentially the mechanics of both games are quite similar. My fourth tip is to avoid constantly teaching players brand new rules. I know that there is a huge backlog of games that I know I have in my collection, so I'm like, oh, we played that game last time, I'm gonna teach them this game this time. It's really hard to kind of put the brakes on and say, you know what, I taught a heavy game last session, let's replay that game today so that we don't have to spend half an hour learning a brand new game, learning new concepts. So I think the hurdle for most people when it comes to playing those heavier games is the rules teach. And depending on how the rules are being taught and how many niggly rules there are, that can often really deter people from wanting to engage in another board game night. So what my general rule of thinking is basically teach a brand new medium to heavyweight game once every 2 to 3 game sessions. That way you got one where you can kind of go, oh, look, let's get excited about this game. But then in the next session, you get to actually play the game, enjoy the evening, socialize without having to have this half an hour, instructional session at the beginning, especially if people have a lot of things on in their life or people have just come from a long day at work on a Friday night. That might be the last thing people want to kind of sit through. So for me, I've been a little bit more perceptive and aware of like, okay, we played this game 2 game sessions ago or 3 game sessions ago. Let's replay this game again because everyone knows how to play and we can just get through more games if people already build up a database of rules for games that they know. And eventually you'll have this great library of games that people already know how to play. And I like springboarding as well, where a simpler game might be able to help teach the rules for a more difficult game. Sometimes if you really have that desire to want to play something fresh each and every time, then I would consider introducing simple strategic games. So teach one simple game that takes about 5 minutes to introduce, play that game, and then maybe in the next session, introduce the next heavy game. Tip number 5 is all about having enough space. One of the limitations to playing new games or acquiring new games is the fact that some of these games take a long time to set up, especially if it's a big Euro game. And so one of my friends suggested this really cool solution. So if you don't have, a board gaming table and you've only got a dining table, just kind of like mine, this is a really cool, quick way to set up a game before game night or to save a game at the end of game night so that things don't have to be packed away or reset up again. And what it is basically using like a cork board or a message board, one that you can buy from your local stationery store. I know I've got these little timber rails that we're using, and if you see behind me, I've actually bought a thicker piece of wood that we're going to actually cover with this really cool felt that I bought from a fabric store to actually make this more of a permanent feature where we can kind of lift the game when we're finished with it and stack everything together at the end of game night, and then I won't have to set it up again the next time we have another game night. So this is a really easy, fast storage solution for transporting and moving games, so everyone can kind of have their dining table back after you've finished. It also gives me time to actually pre-set up the game the way I want it and to kind of go, ooh, we need to have that deck ready or sort those pieces out. Even got these really cool little containers that I bought from the local supermarket, and these only cost like $1 or $2, and you can even go to like $2 shops or even discount stores, and they have surprisingly some amazing containers that you can actually use as well, and I put those all on the board too. A closer look at the actual thicker board that I'm actually making at the moment, so I'll show you that in a future video. Now, thank you once again for joining me for another Board Game Sanctuary vlog. If you really like this video, I'm always open to hearing your thoughts and opinions. Please don't forget to write in the comment section below. If you really want to support me, please give us a like and subscribe, as well as considering checking out my Patreon page. And if you want to see more cool topic videos, please check out my channel, and I've got videos on board game mechanics, top games to get if you're new to board gaming, as well as top 10 rule mistakes that I've made in the most common modern board games. So lots to check out on my channel, so stick around. Hopefully you'll discover something that you'll enjoy. Otherwise, this is Danny signing out. I'll definitely see you again next time. Goodbye.